What's going on, guys? Kevin, or the Sports Geek here, and this morning I sent out an email asking for DFS questions for a Q&A video. I've done 3 of these in the past, which I'll link to below in the YouTube description. You can check those out if you haven't already seen them. And with the NFL season right around the corner, I thought it'd be a good time to do my 4th DFS Q&A video. So let's get right into it. First question, I don't have a computer. Is there any good apps that could possibly help with NFL DraftKings? So yeah, I talk about it a lot. If you watch my other videos, Fantasy Labs is my #1 go-to product or service for DFS, and they do have a pretty good app. I would recommend trying to get maybe a really cheap laptop or something to do your research and to look through that, but if you can only use mobile, Fantasy Labs does have an app, so I would check that out. I'm still learning the Vegas odds, but could you go over them in depth? So I actually have a video about this on my channel. Just search in YouTube the Sports Geek Betting Odds Explained or the Sports Geek Vegas Odds Explained, and you'll find my video about this. It'll talk about NFL spread betting and total or over-under betting. I use the free Fantasy Labs as part of my decision-making process for DFS. I've always wondered, do you go by the pro trends when making your picks, the bargain rating, or a little bit of both? So I actually use the paid version. I think there's a lot more information, it's a little more in-depth. The free there's a lot of free tools that are good, but I like to use my pro model or the Sports Geek, which anyone can access if they have an account. So I like to use the models, and I do look at the pro trends, but that's kind of based within the models. So if you only are using the free information, I would kind of use everything you can, not just look at bargain rating or pro trends, just kind of gather all the information you can from the tools. How many sources do you rely on before making your final decision? So I basically rely on a ton of different sources, but I mostly rely on myself. So what I do is I kind of get my own thoughts, usually on maybe Tuesday, maybe even Monday if I start to look into the next week. I'll get my own thoughts together and kind of decide on some teams or players that I think I might like for the week. And then throughout the week I'll do research, and then I'll kind of make my final decision usually on Friday or Saturday. So this one's a 2-part question. I'll start with the first one. How long do you look at your lineups during the week and the night before? So I like to probably build my lineups around Friday or Saturday, and then I'll probably think about them quite a bit right up until Sunday, 1 p.m. kickoff, and then that's when I kind of relax. But I try not to think about them too much after I've set them. And the second part of the question was, how do you stop yourself from overthinking? So I kind of touched on that. It is hard to stop thinking about your DFS lineups because you always think of ways that you can improve it, or you try to think of if you took the right players, if you're making a mistake or whatever. But I would just trust in your process. Once you set it, basically just leave it at that and trust your process from the week of research, and then kind of just watch for maybe some injury news and notes and stuff. But you probably don't want to be changing lineups unless there's like an injury, and then you can kind of change your lineups. But besides that, once you set your lineups, I would pretty much leave them most of the time. What tools do you use or websites for projecting player ownerships on DraftKings? So this was something I did on my own last year. I didn't really write out every single player, but I wrote out a lot of the players that I liked, and then I kind of tried to guess their ownerships based on doing some research and seeing who everyone else liked. But fortunately for us this year, Fantasy Labs is actually doing that. They're going to give you a range, so they might give you maybe 9 to 12% where they think it's going to fall in. And obviously we haven't seen how accurate that's going to be, but they've got a good team at Fantasy Labs that's going to be putting in a lot of work into those projections, so I can't wait for that. When selecting lower priced wide receivers, do you take into account whether the #1 receiver will get the defense's better coverage guy? So yeah, that's absolutely one of the things I look at each week is the coverage and the opponent's cornerbacks and just secondary in general. And then you can sometimes find #1 receiver going up against a top cornerback, and he might get shadowed. You can look at research to see if cornerbacks in certain defenses do shadow. So if a team's #1 is going to get shadowed, then you might look at the #2 who might be facing a weaker cornerback. But I wouldn't just necessarily go away from a #1 just because he's facing a top cornerback or a #1 coverage guy. It just depends on the team and the player and the week, and a lot of different things go into it. But yeah, it's definitely something you want to look at. How do you go about packaging up certain players from one team, and do you ever limit yourself, for instance, no more than 3 players from one team? So yeah, packaging up certain players, we call that stacking. Basically, I'm always looking to stack a quarterback with at least 1 receiver. And do I have a limit, like no more than 3 players from one team? Usually three players from one team would be pretty average for me. I'd either go with a quarterback with 2 receivers, a quarterback with 1 receiver, a quarterback with a running back and a receiver sometimes works. And then it all depends on value of the week. Sometimes you can go a quarterback with 3 of the position players, maybe 2 receivers and a running back, or 3 receivers. It all depends on their prices and how many points you think they're going to score on DraftKings. How do you decide between paying up for a running back versus wide receiver versus quarterback? So basically, how do I decide between paying up between the different positions? It all depends week to week where I find value, which players I think is going to do well. But in general, I like to pay up for wide receivers the most. But I think that's going to be a popular strategy this year, so it might be a good idea to maybe pay up at running back or pay up at quarterback. So we'll see how it goes each week, but it changes week to week, but generally I'd say wide receiver. Do you ever actually pay up for a tight end given how many value plays there usually are in a given week? So I kind of made this mistake last year, and I don't know if it's going to end up being a mistake this year, or maybe the high priced tight ends are going to go off, but last year I overpaid for tight ends in some positions that really hurt me. I think I had Gronk maybe 3 or 4 weeks where he didn't perform too well. So I did make the mistake a little bit last year in paying up for tight ends, but you never really know when the tight ends are going to hit and when the value plays are going to hit, when the elite tight ends are going to hit. So I think tight end is generally a position that you can probably go down to the value tier, maybe 3,000 to 4,000. But sometimes paying up for a guy like Gronk when he puts up 35 DraftKings points is worth it. So it's all week to week, and it all really depends. But I would say that, yeah, tight end is a value position for sure. How do you pick your sleeper picks for your NFL GPP lineups? I was noticing all last year's winners always punted a position sometimes to win. So yeah, generally the winning lineups usually have maybe 1 or 2 pretty low owned guys that go off for a big game. So when I won my big prize in week 2 last year, I had Bortles and Allen Robinson, and I believe they were both below 2%. I want to say even maybe around 1%. I'd have to check on that. But generally, when you win a tournament, you usually have one guy who's low owned who goes off. And how do I find those sleeper picks? I guess it's kind of just kind of a little bit of gut feel mixed with research, mixed with luck. So you got to find some guys who no one's really talking about, no one's really on, but you think they have the potential to have a huge game. Maybe they're a really skilled player, they just haven't had good weeks leading up to that week or something like that. But it's kind of, yeah, a little bit of gut feel and a little bit of research and a little bit of luck all mixed together. How come you haven't played MLB so much this year? So I have played probably, I'd say maybe 3 or 4 times a week on average. But during the summer, it's pretty tough for me in general. I'm playing hockey a couple times a week. I'm playing baseball. I like to relax on the weekend, so I don't like to be on a computer too much. So summer is usually tough for me to play really serious, at least for the DraftKings contest for MLB. This year I got married. Just a lot of stuff going on in the summer for me. I put in a pool last year. I want to spend time outside. I don't want to be on a computer all day doing research. And another reason why I like NFL quite a bit more than MLB is NFL you have like 5 or 6 days to do your research. MLB you kind of you're stuck in that one day, and you're probably gonna have to be on the computer leading up to all the different lineups coming out, which is like 5, 6, 7, 8 p.m. Eastern time. So it really ties you down on those single nights. So I do play sometimes, and I'll kind of set aside time to do my research. But overall, I don't play MLB as much because I like to relax during the summer a little bit. Don't like to be on a computer as much. But NFL, I'll do like 5 hours each day or something like that. And it makes it a lot easier when you can spread it out every day. When submitting multiple GPP lineups, what is the highest percentage of exposure you will have on any one player? Does it depend on the slate, confidence in that player, or number of lineups? So it's a combination of a lot of things. Usually the highest owned players in my lineups will be around 60 to 80%. A lot of times I'll have guys around 80%. But again, it all depends. If, for example, if I really, really love a player, and let's say he is maybe $5,000 on DraftKings, and I think he's gonna score 30 DraftKings points, I think the value is huge. I just absolutely love him, and nobody's talking about him. I think he'll be low owned. I might go up to 90, maybe even 100% on that player. So again, it all depends on the value I find in that player, and then what I think his ownership will be, and just kind of lineup construction. A lot of things go into it, but basically I like to max it out around 80% most weeks. Do you feel like we can cash in some large games early in the NFL season, weeks 1 to 4, because DFS isn't as honed in on who are the big point players? So I think there's kind of 2 sides of this. The sharp players will definitely be honed in, they'll do their research, but I think that can give you an advantage as well, because I think a lot of people are going to be on the same players. Everyone this preseason has been talking about certain players being the value picks, being the chalk, and I think we can pivot from a lot of those players and find some undervalued players that aren't being talked about. And then I do think that there are some casual players coming onto DraftKings, and maybe they're just going to go with who they liked from last year or who they knew from last year, and they're not really looking at rookies or that kind of thing. So I definitely think we can take advantage in the first couple weeks, and I think there is a big opportunity for everyone. I won my big cash prize in week 2 with the Jaguars stack that I talked about earlier, and I'm hoping to do that again in the first couple weeks this year. Do you avoid low total games? So generally when games have low totals, they're expected to be low scoring. You generally don't want too much exposure to those players, but then again, you can find some players with low ownership. Maybe Vegas projects it to be a low scoring game, but you have a feeling that it's gonna be high scoring, and you can take advantage of that finding a couple good players. So I don't totally avoid them, but yeah, I do have less exposure to low total games. Should you avoid high favorite spreads as they could be sitting out the second half if it's a blowout? No, I don't avoid teams that are favored by a ton. It doesn't really happen in the NFL. In college football, you definitely can see that happening when teams are up 35 points at half. But you don't really see that in the NFL. Usually if players are sitting out, it's maybe towards the end of the fourth quarter. And by that point, they've already put up a ton of points. So hopefully your DraftKings players have put up a ton of points for you as well. So no, I don't avoid those high spread games. All right, guys, so that's it for this Q&A video. If you guys enjoy these types of videos, make sure you click the thumbs up button here on YouTube. If you haven't already subscribed, make sure you do that. If you don't have an account at Fantasy Labs, check out the link in the YouTube description below. You'll definitely want Fantasy Labs for this NFL season. Thanks a lot for watching. Hope you guys make some money this year.